live this December. It's January 5th, 2021. This year has been coming out like a lion. It's the year of the ox, I think you said the other day, Chris, but it feels like it's a lion, it's a cheetah, it's moving by fast. Here we are, and man, oh man, the news from China, it seems like, thank you, China, because you are giving us content. On a daily.
First of all, you got some good news about what we're just sort of playing around with here with this show, right?
Yeah, we as a matter of fact, I will tweet this out right now. The show is now on iTunes and Spotify. I don't have the iTunes link, so I can't send that out yet. But it will be on iTunes here by the end of the day. It's on Spotify now, and it will be on all the major podcast platforms it's 24. It usually takes 24 to 48 hours. So the show will be wherever you get your podcast within 24 to 48 hours, maybe by the end of the week. It should be there. Yesterday's episode will be the first episode. And then as we do these, we will release them within a few hours on the podcast stream. So go ahead and just type in Feeding the Dragon. You will get some hits for Chris's older stuff for interviews that were titled that. But under the podcast section, you will be able to find exactly this show, and it's the same cover as Chris's book, so it's pretty easy to find. So yeah, I'm excited about that. So if you missed the show, you missed part of it, anywhere you get a podcast, you can go catch up there. We'd love for you to be here though and talk live as we go through the issues.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is you just reached out and said, hey, we had some good banter a couple different times. Like, I really loved your newsletter. You liked some of the stuff I was tweeting out, some of the op-eds I had. And we were just like, hey, you know what? Let's riff a little bit, see if we can talk about China, get people engaged. And before we knew it, we were having several hundred people checking us out. And we were like, hey, you know what? Like, let's keep going and see if it builds. And it was building. And we decided, hey, let's put it up on podcasts for people to hear, and we'll see if it continues to go. I mean, we're not forcing anybody to be on here, but we think we have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about, and we want to talk about it in a way that is approachable for all Americans, because China is an American problem. This is not an elitist problem. This is not a Wall Street problem. It's not a Hollywood problem. It's not an NBA problem. It affects us all, and we need to talk about it. And quite frankly, the two of us were going to get together again tomorrow and do another episode, but overnight, there was like a WTF situation going on with multiple stories that I just reached out to Ryan. I was like, we got to talk more about this stuff today, because this is crazy town what's happening. And just watching it in real time on CNBC this morning, that was even more eye-opening. So we're going to cover a couple things. One is we want to do Jack Ma. Number two is we want to talk about this delist, relist question that just sort of came up and suddenly decisions were made, and it's another WTF moment. And then one that we both missed because we were trying to get some R&R over the holidays was the fact that the NBA is not on broadcast television in China, and no one's talking about that. That is crazy town to me, because that's still punishment against Daryl Morey and his right to free speech here on the American soil of him criticizing what was going on in Hong Kong in 2019. They're still getting punished for it. And in fact, the 76ers and the Rockets aren't even on Tencent, the streaming platform. Forget broadcast television. So anyway, a lot to talk about. So where do we want to start is the question on our WTF episode.
Jack Ma. So we were joking. So you and I recorded or went live yesterday about 11:30 Central Time. I have a weekly show with Ellen Wald. We did it at 1 o'clock. And she was joking around that Jack Ma was in Saudi Arabia, kind of riffing on that. And, no one knows where he is. And then this morning you wake up and CNBC is like, hey, we know where he is. He's laying low. As I said yesterday, listen, and I'll say this often, I love China, love the country, and love the people, but you also have to realize what you're dealing with, which is propaganda. And when CNBC says it has a source, or the Washington Post says it has a source inside the White House, it's a source. I don't know who the source is. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know how credible it is. I'm a little skeptical here. It seems too convenient to have the source, whereas Jack Ma could have went on a multitude of social media platforms and just sent out something from a verified account, taken a picture. There's 1,000 ways they could have done this. The leak to CNBC seems fishy to me. I'm not saying it's not true. It just seems fishy. What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, no one knows for sure, and I know somebody we really respect well, Bill Bishop, great expert out there, is sort of feeling like that was all a lot of nonsense, that he's disappeared and whatever it is. We do know that history does repeat there, and the CCP has been really difficult on any sort of dissent, and it's actually been crescendoing into this year, which is going to be the 100-year anniversary of the CPC or the CCP, however you want to call it. So it wouldn't surprise me if the rumors about maybe not his death or his full-blown imprisonment are over-exaggerated, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he has been essentially taken off the map for the next year, sort of a la what Fan Bingbing had happened to her a year ago. So it's hard to tell, but it was really interesting to watch Squawk Box this morning because, by the way, I love David Faber. I think he's one of the few guys on that show that calls out what is going on and questions a lot of the sort of press release narrative that goes on in that network. And by the way, I love the network too, but there is obviously a side of that journalism, which is press releasing for C-suite. And then there's another side that is being journalistic and doing its research and so on. And Faber's one of those guys. But he gets this source that's telling him that's all is good with Jack Ma, and he's just, quote, laying low. And then they go into a discussion about that. In fact, Jim Cramer was a little skeptical about it, which was interesting. But as that conversation went on, you watched Alibaba, which was negative in the futures, trade up 2-3%. Now I think it's up 5% on the day. I question whether that source was just a big shareholder in Alibaba trying to get the stock back up, right? And then the part that's even crazier, the part that is sort of mind-blowing, and I have to say I've been in China lots, and I've never seen actually CNBC on the air there in hotels. You see a CNN International, you see Bloomberg. I haven't seen CNBC, but apparently CNBC has been on the air quite a bit there. During that conversation, they blacked it out. It was gone. So obviously somebody in China doesn't want the conversation of Jack Ma happening on American networks, nor do they want anybody in China seeing what they're talking about in regards to Jack Ma. So the whole thing is super surreal, super weird, stranger than fiction, and quite common when you're talking about CCP and some of the actions over there.
So let's just take the last part about blacking it out. We've talked about this some, is that there's ground swelling against Jack Ma. I'm surprised if it's true that he's just laying low, that Beijing is not coming out kind of poking the stick like, oh, you're so big a few months ago, why are you hiding now? Trying to almost antagonize Jack as a weakling, as a coward, as someone who's in hiding now, and trying to pit him against the government. And so to black that out makes you wonder that, listen, you can't make sense of everything, but it's like, okay, well, this would be a good chance to take that propaganda and say, listen, oh, Jack Ma was okay to criticize us. Now he's running, he's hiding, the population's behind us. Like, there's an easy propaganda message there that seems it doesn't fit with blacking it out, I would say.
I mean, and it's a really good point to bring up because a lot of people maybe haven't been in China before and might not know what blackout means. But when you're watching an international broadcast and something comes on that the censors, the Ministry of Propaganda, does not want anybody in a hotel to see. Remember, Westerners get to stay in hotels that can get the feeds in from international sort of broadcasts. The rest of the population really can't unless they have specific satellite or VPN capability. So if there's a news program that comes on the CCP doesn't want you to see, the TV just goes black. It literally looks like the TV is broken, and it just stays black until the story is over. And a perfect example is what happened this morning with Jack Ma. I'll give you another example where it didn't black out, which was during the Sandy Hook massacre. I was actually over there shooting the China portion for Iron Man 3, and that broadcast of everything going on with Sandy Hook was all over the news there because they wanted everybody in China to see what a Wild West crazy, country that the U.S. was. And of course, they played it up more and more and made it sound like, don't go there, it's dangerous, and all that crazy stuff. So you see them work it both different ways as far as what they black out and what they don't. But I agree with you. You could argue that them allowing their populace to see what was going on with Jack Ma and the fact that he is laying low might actually make them even more angry at this guy because they're already calling him the founder of the 996, which is the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 day a week common work week, right? There's just a lot of rancor towards this guy among the populace, and it's crazy. It's flipped on a switch.
Okay, so I want to play a video that you shared this morning from, was it 2019, I believe?
Yes, September 10, 2019.
So let's see here. Let me
You made two pretty bold predictions about Jack.
before I go any further, can you hear that, Chris? Is it coming through loud and clear?
I can hear it.
Okay, let me blow this up here. Why don't you break down who the people are in the video?
Yeah, so you have Kyle Bass, who, by the way, is a really interesting, Wall Street investor. He's been calling Japanese sovereign debt a big problem. He's been calling out the different China issues. He's a really smart guy to listen to. Obviously, he probably talks his book quite a bit, but on top of it, he really knows his stuff. He's talking to Miles Gao, who's the dissident from China, who people might know of as the guy affiliated with Steve Bannon. And obviously there's a negative connotation with a lot of people in regards to Steve, or I should say half the country. So therefore there's a half the country that doesn't like Miles Gao. So take what he's saying with a grain of salt. But I think what he actually says in September of 2019, and actually apparently said even in 2018, is really interesting.
Okay, we'll play it here. It's just a short clip.
Jack Ma. Why do you think he retired from Alibaba? And is Alibaba run by the CPC? And what do you think is likely to happen to Jack Ma in the next year or so?
I think him is only two way. All the China's billionaire, only two way. I always talk 1 year.
Only two things happen.
So jail and die.
Dead. He's either going to jail or he's going to be killed.
I think 50-50.
Or he might just fall off a wall.
Yes.
Okay, we'll stop there. It's another minute or so, but that's basically what they say. Just kind of reiterate that point a few times.
Yeah, and then what happens over the next minute and a half is Kyle asks Miles, "Well, why is that?" And Kyle, I think, is believing, or he might already know the answer, but he's believing he'll go into, well, Alibaba's this huge e-com situation and he's making all this money and it's terrifying to the CCP and they want to crack him down. No, what Miles said is he's essentially creating competition for the banks and the central bank through Ant Financial, Alipay, etc. And once you compete with the banks, once you are competing with the banking system of China, you're essentially a dead man walking. And that was essentially the extent of the interview. So it's really interesting because he's predicting possibly what's been going on or possibly not. But we do know whatever is going on with Jack Ma, it is a problem with the CCP and they have quieted him somehow.
So it's funny. I found the first half more interesting than the second half because he says that all billionaires are going to have this fate, jail or they're going to die. And so they do talk about the financial aspect, but there is a kind of overarching theme that once you reach that level, unless you're going to kiss the ring, you're going to get whacked essentially. And so while he does bring up some interesting points about, the Ant Financial, I'm wondering, you wouldn't say it's true of all the billionaires in China. There's a ton of them. So they're not all having Ant Financial type backing, right? Or groups that are competing with the Chinese banks. So, but this is how things run at China. When you get to the top, either you're going to kiss the ring or you're going to pay the price.
Yeah, I think he did. He might have gone one step further, right? I mean, for a long time, he was kissing the ring, bringing that apple a day in for the CCP and toting the party line and being that showpiece of here's a guy from humble beginnings who, used capitalism with Chinese, characteristics to build into this huge aspirational billionaire sort of front man. He did that all right. Then you could argue the next step would be, you know what? I'm just going to stay neutral. I don't need to do that anymore. And sometimes the CCP is okay with that, I guess. But what he did was he went the next level, which was actually start to criticize the CCP. And that's where you just don't want to go. And that's where we see him today. And I guess we'll find out the extent of the repercussions for what he did here at some point.
Yeah. And so I guess one of the things I thought about is if this report is true and he is laying low, then you presume he's in China, obviously. He's in bad shape. He's in real bad shape because if he's in China and he can't get out, he's in bad shape. And to your point though, is that it's not really proper for this to be happening and the stock exchange is kind of trading because you're getting these source reports and we don't know what's going on, what the future of the company is, and it's really tough on the American side to look at this going, well, we need to know something, we need some clarity.
Yeah, I mean, think about the transparency issues that we already have with Chinese companies, right? We've been talking about the accounting practices and the fact that the SEC is debating whether to allow these companies access to the U.S. markets, and that's all accounting, and it's overseen by various, third-party accountancy firms and whatever, and maybe they're terrible what they do, or maybe they're fraudulent, but at least there's some sort of governance. When you're dealing with a source, who the heck knows who that source is? I mean, I'm hoping that David Faber gets it from a real source that he trusts, and obviously is bringing it to light on the air in a way that he feels comfortable with. But who knows where that source actually got their information? Or maybe is it Joe Tsai or something? Who knows? And who knows what the motivation is behind that source that's beyond just typically sort of a leak to pump and dump a stock, right? It could be a very strong CCP narrative. And that brings me into sort of, I think, the next topic that we should talk about, because we are talking about U.S. capital markets. But another WTF moment in the last 24 hours was this sort of delisting on New Year's Eve of 3 state-owned enterprise with PLA, People's Liberation Army ties, these telecom companies, and one is China Unicom, one's China Telecom, one's China Mobile. They were all being delisted as of New Year's Eve. And then suddenly the New York Stock Exchange comes out with an announcement last night, which, by the way, was on the initial source, was a source I hadn't seen before, but apparently, according to Twitter, it was some sort of a Chinese journalism publication or platform. So people were a little suspicious. But then as it rolled out, it turns out the NYSE did decide to keep them listed. And apparently it was because of some conversation they had with regulators and the Treasury Department to do it. But there's no explanation. What do you think of that?
I think that when Americans look at the SEC, and just take China aside, and you look at the SEC and the New York Stock Exchange and how these things work, it's not set up for our benefit. It's just not, and that's the frustrating part. A frustrating part for me, because you look at this China issue and you go, well, what's going on here? Well, when you start peeling back the layers of the onion on what's happening just on a day-to-day basis, it's not surprising, and that's the disappointing thing. Is like, it's not surprising that this happens. As I pointed out last week, I think it was. Insider trading. If insider trading is a crime, then you should not be able to have state-owned entities traded on our stock exchange. You can be traded on, the Hong Kong or Shanghai or Johannesburg. But if you're saying that insider trading is against the rules, then how can state-owned enterprises be traded on our stock exchange? So the rules are not set up to keep companies out, and it doesn't surprise me. It's funny. Last night I had a text from someone when the story broke, like, "What's going on here?" It's like, money. It's all about money. It's not about the things that we care about in the show. We talk about, it's just about money, and that's frustrating.
Well, I got up this morning after seeing some of this stuff. I actually changed my Twitter handle, or the header underneath there. I'm sure no one notices that stuff, but I actually changed myself. And by the way, I always felt uncomfortable calling myself a China expert. I sort of feel like I fell into the China space, so I'm sort of a layman, practical applied expert in the space. But I actually changed it to populist China expert. Why? Because I look at it from a populist point of view. I look at it from what should our relationship be with China to benefit the most Americans possible, whether that's 99% or whether it's 95%. That's the way we need to look at interacting with China, because there is a way to do it that will benefit the masses of people here in the United States. But unfortunately, it does seem like the decisions are being made by people that aren't all that interested in the populist sort of portion of the country, which is 95% of the people out there or more. So I'm with you. I don't know what happened with that whole delist, relist thing.
But what's frustrating is that it's hard to talk about the kind of issue, because when you do so and you're trying to be fair and equitable, you realize that the system here is already screwed up. And so, it's like, well, you have this issue about listing and delisting companies in China. And so you say, well, you want to tackle it this way. Well, when you start saying that, and you're trying to be intellectually honest, you go looking at how that would impact stuff here. You're like, oh wait, we do that here, it won't work because we have all these other problems. And so I think the China issue is good to expose the flaws in the U.S. system, because once you start digging in, you realize that there are a lot of problems with the way that we've constructed our system that aren't beneficial for the masses.
No, it's 100%. And by the way, I'd be a complete hypocrite if I said, I'm anti-elite or whatever. I mean, heaven, I come from the Hollywood business, the west side of LA. Yes, I'm not a billionaire or whatever, but I actually, I guess, could be part of that portion of the population in certain ways, but I don't agree with it. And I feel like if we keep going this direction, we're going to completely bifurcate a country into a place where we can't fix it. And that's going to play right into China's hands. I mean, they are giddy about some of the stuff that happens. I mean, how about that tweet last night from Senator Hawley, who, by the way, I saw on Twitter people sort of celebrating the fact that, somebody came and was pounding on the door of where his wife and kids were in Washington, D.C. while he was in Missouri, and yelling out obscenities or whatever it was. And I probably would have preferred him not to mention that it was 100% Antifa, because I think that shuts off half of the country from actually maybe believing a terrible situation happened, and actually thinking maybe he lied about it, which I find it hard to believe anybody would lie about something that happens to their wife and kids like that. But that was a terrible moment, I think, in sort of a crescendo of terrible moments. If you look at whether it was Pelosi's house that got vandalized, or McConnell's house who got vandalized, these are things that make the Chinese Communist Party giddy. They have schadenfreude when they see democracy like this start to decay in a way that is pitting our own people against each other. And that's why I also changed my Twitter today to something along the lines of the China challenge will unite this country, because I do think it will. Once we rally around this cause, it will bring us together with a common purpose, but we need to get there. It's going to take us a while at this speed.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, the elite, just so everyone knows, when I use the term elite, I'm using either A, people who are in power, or B, people who have enough money to influence power. So if you have enough money, let's just say Bill Gates, he's elite because he has the money and he influences power. Theoretically, Bill Gates could have that kind of money and stay at home and mind his own business. I wouldn't call him elite because he's not using it for power. So that's when I'm using the term. It's not about how much money you have. It's how much power or access to power that you have. So theoretically, one of these senators, hookers that they're sleeping with on the side, has a lot of power because she can expose them. So technically, she could be elite. I'm not saying any senators are doing that, but possible. As for your point about what is going on with our country, I'm curious your take on this. For me, China's biggest threat right now is outside. So India, Australia, the U.S., what the EU was, EU, Africa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The U.S.'s biggest threat is itself, right? And so, where do we want to go moving forward with our country? Do we want socialized medicine? Do we want, these issues? And so it's really weird to look at the two countries because we're trying to find out our identity. China's, as you say, they're looking at us saying, this is why you don't want to be the U.S., because look at all these problems. We can bring everyone and rally together, but they have a lot of problems externally. What's your take on that? Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I would. And you see that just in everyday life. I mean, I watch my son play lacrosse or soccer, and sometimes they're the best team in a tournament and sometimes they're not. But when they are the best team and you see them being able to play other teams and handily win, yet you see them infighting on the team, you go, oh, well, there's an Achilles heel for that and for my son's team in order to possibly lose a game that they shouldn't lose, right? And we are the world leader. I think we're going to be severely challenged this century by a country that I wouldn't say is better than us. I would say they have 4 times the population as us. So it's going to be hard to fend them off as a world leader. But right now, it does seem like our country's biggest enemy is itself. And it's something that I'm really, upset about. And I'm purposed to try to figure out, like, how do we in our little cog in the wheel sort of positions in society help mend this? And I do think one of the white knights in this is probably the common challenge of China. But if we keep ignoring what the challenge is and we keep sort of duct taping over problems, or we keep doing things where there is no good explanation, like relisting PLA influenced telecom companies in China, we're never going to get there.
Yeah, and so it's quite frustrating. So you brought up something early on. Let's circle back around to it. The NBA is not on mainstream TV in China, which is a huge deal because not only for the NBA but for Chinese people, they love the NBA. It's a big sport over there. They love the athletes. They love everything about it. You can speak to this a lot more than I can, but they're all of the top athletes in the NBA are going over in the off season to China to do photo shoots or shoe signs or shoe signings, whatever. They have these events. They're getting paid millions of dollars for endorsements to go over there during the off season normally. LeBron, Kobe, these guys. So to cut them out is a big deal for both sides. But the thing that's even more interesting is that now you have the Rockets and the 76ers who are not even on the streaming platform, and the Rockets were Yao Ming's team. So the Rockets being cut out is like the Dallas Cowboys being cut out of Texas. Like it's got to hit home on some level, and China is sticking to it, and they're going to follow wherever Daryl Morey goes. I guess they're going to keep all of his teams out, which is interesting because, if this continues, over the next 3 to 4 years, he'll go to a new team. And so will they just keep compounding this, or do you think we're going to come to some kind of resolution?
Well, look, I've been vocal on the NBA subject since the day of that Daryl Morey tweet. I've been on the air talking about it very openly. I've had solutions. I don't like sitting up and calling people out and telling them to give up their $50 million a year in China just simply to speak out for something. Like, you need to unify, and you can't create lone wolves that go for a good cause. You need to unite the league. You need to unite other sports partners, possibly even the Olympics, get Congress behind it, and then allow free speech to actually take its course and be able to criticize without retaliation. So that's one thing. But the part that I think is really interesting is that when Daryl Morey was fired or let go or retired from the Rockets, I think there was a sigh of relief in the NBA that now their problem was gone. And things would go back to this normal course with China. What was interesting, though, is like a couple of weeks later, he ended up as the GM or president of the Philadelphia 76ers. So, of course, I was called by a bunch of people to ask, like, was that cleared with China? And, is there going to be repercussions, whatever? And I couldn't get an answer. I even talked to the old CEO of the NBA China and various other sources trying to find out exactly what happened. And I never got a good answer. So for me, I felt like that was probably the 76ers just going, we want the best guy for the job. We all know Daryl Morey's really good at what he does. And they just went and hired him and wanted to see what would happen after that hire. And no one knew, except for probably people like Adam Silver, et cetera, that probably were getting phone calls from China saying, whoa, what the 76ers do? Like, that's crazy. And they were probably scrambling, trying to figure out what they should do about it and whether there would be repercussions. And now we're finding out there are. They are not on CCTV Sports, which is CCTV Channel 5. They are not on the Rockets, and the 76ers are not even on the streaming partner, which is Tencent. So repercussions continue, punishment continues for what Daryl Morey did, which was, quite frankly, very right in American ideals, values, and principles. He exercised his right to free speech on our soil. I think what's even more concerning is the fact that finding the news about that has been very difficult. There has not been coverage of it on ESPN. There hasn't been coverage of it on CNN, et cetera. It's The Guardian, it's various other publications around the world that have been reporting on it, but it's been very crickets here in the United States, which just goes to show that once again, we're being third rail about very, very important issues to average Americans.
So, yeah, let's just kind of tease this out just so everyone understands. Yao Ming is or was the head of the Chinese basketball league, right? So when you're at that level in China, you have the connections to find out whatever you want to find out. So Adam Silver, the 76ers could have contacted Yao and said, hey, if we bring in Daryl, what's going to happen here? So that either did happen, and they said, we're going to cut you out. And they said, okay, or it didn't happen. But the NBA has the ability to find this out. And I'm not taking a side. I'm just saying, like, it's not like it was an unknown. They had the ability to figure out what might happen. And then the other thing, though, is that so they hired him despite it, maybe, or didn't ask. I don't know. Doesn't matter. From the Chinese side, how long can you cut out access to your favorite team before people go, good Lord, man, I just want to watch the Rockets play basketball. I just want to watch James Harden. I just want to watch my team. Like that. Those are the things that actually undercut. Like, it's like, I've had a long day at the shop. I want to come home, turn on Rockets basketball, and you're preventing me.
Yeah, but here's the crazy part is, like we saw with the flip of the switch with Jack Ma, we saw the same thing when it comes to Daryl Morey. In fact, there's a photo in the Guardian article of this. I think it says "fuck you," Daryl Morey on the actual photo, and it's a bunch of Chinese people holding up that banner. So the Chinese Communist Party has created this anti-Daryl Morey, what he said about Hong Kong, about our own nationalistic pride is not what we stand for. And now people are upset about it. And then on top of it, in talking to friends in China, it sounds like the CBA, which is the China Basketball Association, has taken great strides to take advantage of this opportunity and fill the hole. So now it seems like there's a lot more enthusiasm about the CBA than there was before this. And the CBA was gaining a lot of ground and crescendoing like everything else that happens where the U.S. goes in, brings a product and service. There's a lot of excitement around it. And then suddenly the Chinese do their own version. And then that becomes the new version that everybody wants. We were starting to see that with basketball. Basketball was losing its foothold there a bit. And I don't think the CCP feels like they got to placate the NBA at this point. I just don't.
So, but here's what's going to happen. In the Olympics, which are just a few months away, right? They're 2021 because they pushed back a year, right?
That's the Japanese Olympics.
But the the U.S. will have a team there that will dominate. And if China decides to field a team, we're literally going to dunk all over them. I don't know if China will send a team or not, but if they do, we will dunk all over them. Will the CCP censor out the Olympics while we go and absolutely blast the Chinese in basketball?
I don't know the answer to that, other than the fact that China's really thinking about the Olympics that they have coming up in Beijing, the Winter Olympics after that, and going, the last thing we want to do is spend all this money, create all this nationalistic pride around this event, and then find half of the world boycotts it, right? So that is a huge leverage point for the United States, a huge leverage point for our athletes, a huge leverage point that we can use for all kinds of things to right the wrongs that are ongoing in this relationship. Whether we utilize it or not, I don't know. And I'm starting to lose a little hope here.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, but I think it's interesting to see how they handle the Summer Olympics, because you will have the U.S., you will have China, they will be playing basketball. Will you block those games out, or will you let our players play their players? Now, I have no faith that our NBA players are going to go out there saying anything remotely controversial as it pertains to China, but how will the CCP handle that? Because the CCP taking strides to go and to increase their foothold with the CBA. That's one thing, but watching your guys just getting blasted off the floor by the Americans, it does remind you that, okay, what you're watching is not elite basketball. What you're watching is some third-rate basketball by some third-rate players. When the real athletes are on the floor, your guys can't compete. And so I'm just curious how they handle that, because it's a reminder that the CCP probably doesn't want to remind the people of. But do you cut out your own players playing in the Olympics, because there is that nationalistic pride element? So, well,
maybe what they do is they take the David Faber CNBC method, they put it on a delay, and every time LeBron is about to slam dunk over one of their players, it goes blank, and everybody's wait, what happened to my television? Wait, what happened there? And then it pops back on only when they make a 3-pointer, or only when they make a 2. And then they probably have some side scoreboard that shows a different score. Maybe.
Yeah,
that's possible. You never know. I mean, I've seen crazier stuff done in movies, so who knows?
Well, and so we're only what 4 months away from the Summer Olympics starting, something like that. 5 months. I don't know when they start, if it's May or June, but we're this close. And so as we build to that event, though, the stories out of China will be I can't speak today. I bit my tongue, so I can't be getting more intense because the world will be coming together theoretically. They will be melting together. The CCP has done things to piss off a lot of countries around the world, and so here's this kind of hold on. Let me just. What about Ryan?
That's Man United.
Yeah. What about Ryan? You only like Chris? I mean, I mean.
Hey, Man United, you got to talk about Ryan here. Come on.
Come on.
This is a give and take relationship. This is Penn and Teller. This is Abbott and Costello. This is
Man United's a good dude. He's in and out all the time, so I'm gonna give him a hard time.
Maybe Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey. No, but yeah. Look, the bottom line is this today in 24 hours. I feel like if anybody's paying attention to the China story, it was like WTF all over the place, and the reaction of our country to certain things, their country to certain things, the way journalists are trying to handle it, some of the crickets and the non-conversations about it. It's very surreal, and I think 2021, and I'm glad we're doing this, Ryan, and I'm glad people are paying attention. I think 2021 is going to have a lot of these WTF 24-hour periods, and we're going to be here to talk about them, and hopefully people interact, get on our Twitter, do everything on social media, tell people about this, and let's get this conversation started so we can actually start to solve some of these issues.
So if you are new, we have a podcast that will be coming out as we release these shows. So the podcast, this is the second podcast episode. So by the time you hear this episode, it should be on every podcast platform within 24 to 48 hours. We just got approved for iTunes and Spotify. So that's out. It should be up on all those spots. And then it just kind of gets through the networks within a week or so, but usually sooner. So it should be anywhere that you find podcasts. In the show, we do live. And so we love feedback, comments, even if it is only liking Chris, not Ryan. We'll take those occasionally. I won't display them all. I can't take that much, but we'll display some of those at Ryan Ray Senior or at the Dragon Feeder. You can go there. We don't have a set time. It's kind of what our schedule permits. 3-4 times a week, whatever it is. But if you're on Twitter, you will see us as we get ready to go live and know about that. Chris, anything else before we get out of here today?
Yeah, I would probably say the one place where you're not going to be able to get this podcast is probably inside the firewall of the PRC. So next time you're in China, don't try to look for it without a VPN, because we're going to get controversial. We're going to criticize, and we're going to come up with solutions, though. This is not going to be barking out, calling out things and saying things just because it puts us on a soapbox. Like, we need people to engage on how we're going to move this relationship forward without Cold War or war, but definitely not the way it is right now.
That's right. Okay. For Chris Fenton, this is Ryan Ray. And are we back tomorrow or Thursday? When we back, Chris? Do you know yet?
I don't know. We'll text out and we'll get it outlined. Like, we'll figure it out, man.
Tomorrow or Thursday, one of the two, for sure.
Yep.
And we'll talk to everyone then.